Princess Lyria walked through the diplomatic shuttle with her hands clasped behind her back, and she tried to calm the nervous flutter in her twin hearts, because today marked her first official visit to a human colony, and everything she had heard about these strange beings made her both curious and cautious. The Valdrine Empire had been observing Earth and its colonies for nearly a decade, and the reports were always contradictory because humans seemed weak and fragile compared to most galactic species, yet they had survived countless disasters that should have ended their entire race, and they expanded across space with remarkable speed, despite their limited technology. Her advisor, Kessa, walked beside her and adjusted the translation device in her ear. Remember, Princess, that humans are very different from us, and they reproduce through direct physical contact between two individuals and many species. Find this practice disturbing? Lyria nodded, but she felt more intrigued than disturbed, because the Valdrine reproduced through energy transfer, which required no physical contact at all. And the idea that humans needed to touch each other to create offspring seemed almost romantic in a primitive way. The shuttle landed on Kepler 7 with a gentle thud, and Lyria took a deep breath before the doors opened and she stepped out onto the landing platform where a small group of humans waited to greet her. The first thing that struck her was how similar humans looked to Valdrine despite coming from completely different evolutionary paths, and they had 2 arms and 2 legs and 1 head, just like her people. Though their skin came in shades of brown and pink instead of the pale blue of Valdrine, and they had hair that grew from their heads in various colors. A woman with dark skin and short black hair stepped forward with her hand extended in the human greeting gesture. Welcome to Kepler 7. Princess Lyria, and I am Ambassador Holland, and we are honored by your visit. Lyria carefully touched her 3 fingers to the woman's 5 and felt the warmth of human skin, which was noticeably hotter than Valdrine body temperature. Thank you for inviting me, and I look forward to learning about your culture. The next few hours passed in a blur of introductions and facility tours, and Lyria met dozens of humans who all seemed genuinely excited to meet her, and they asked questions about her homeworld and her people with sincere curiosity that she found refreshing after dealing with other alien species who often looked down on the Valdrine for being pacifists. As evening approached, a young human woman with red hair and green eyes approached Lyria with a friendly smile. Hi, Princess, and I am Claire, and I work as a xenobiologist here, and I was wondering if you might like to attend a small gathering tonight, and it is very informal and just a chance for people to relax and socialize. Lyria looked at Kessa, who nodded slightly in approval. I would enjoy that very much. Claire's face brightened and she clapped her hands together in apparent delight. Wonderful. And I will come get you around 8 tonight and dress however you feel comfortable, because there are no rules at our parties. When Claire left, Kessa turned to Lyria with a concerned expression. Are you certain this is wise, Princess, because these informal human gatherings can be unpredictable? That is exactly why I want to go, and how else will I truly understand them? That evening, Lyria changed from her formal diplomatic robes into a simpler outfit, and she chose a flowing blue dress that matched her skin tone. And she left her long silver hair unbound instead of in the traditional braided crown. Claire arrived precisely at 8 and led Lyria through the colony corridors to a large recreation room where music played loudly, and at least 30 humans talked and laughed together. The atmosphere was chaotic compared to Valdrine's social events, and humans seemed to have no sense of personal space, as they crowded together, and some were consuming beverages that Claire explained contained alcohol, which altered their mental state. Does that not concern your people? Lyria asked, because deliberately impairing your judgment seems dangerous. Claire laughed and shook her head. We only do it in safe environments for fun, and it helps people relax and lower their social inhibitions. Lyria watched with fascination as humans engaged in what Claire called dancing, which involved moving their bodies rhythmically to the music, and some danced alone, while others danced in pairs with their bodies pressed close together. Is that part of reproduction? Lyria whispered. Claire nearly choked on her drink. No. And dancing is just for fun, though. Sometimes it can lead to romance, but that is much more complicated. Over the next hour, Claire introduced Lyria to various humans, and everyone was welcoming, though some seemed nervous about saying the wrong thing and Lyria found their awkwardness endearing. Then, she noticed a man standing near the wall watching the room with alert eyes, and he was taller than most humans, with dark brown skin and black hair cut very short, and he wore a simple shirt and pants, but carried himself with obvious confidence. That is Danny Martinez, Claire said, following Lyria's gaze. And he works security here, and he is a good guy, though. Kind of quiet, Lyria found herself drawn across the room toward him, and she was not sure why, but something about his calm presence in the chaotic environment appealed to her. The man noticed her approach and straightened slightly with a respectful nod. Princess Lyria, and it is an honor to meet you. You can just call me Lyria, and titles feel unnecessary at a party. He smiled and it transformed, his serious face into something warm. Then call me Danny, and are you enjoying the chaos? She laughed because chaos was exactly the right word. It is very different from Valdrine gatherings, and we prefer quiet conversation and soft music. Sounds peaceful, but maybe a bit boring. Perhaps, but this is interesting in its own way, and everyone seems very happy. Danny gestured to an empty couch away from the loudest music. Would you like to sit, and I can explain some of our strange customs if you are curious? They sat together, and Danny proved to be an excellent teacher because he explained human social dynamics with patience and humor, and Lyria found herself genuinely enjoying his company in a way she had not expected. Tell me, Danny, and why do you work in security, and were you a soldier? He shook his head. No, but my family has always served in protective roles, and my grandmother used to say, we carry the guardian legacy in our blood. What does that mean? Danny rolled up his left sleeve to reveal intricate, black patterns permanently marked into his dark skin. She designed this tattoo pattern before she died, and she was a mathematician who studied dimensional physics and strange theoretical stuff I never fully understood. And she said this symbol represented protection and connection across space. Lyria leaned closer to examine the tattoo, and the geometric design seemed to shift and change as she looked at it, and she felt a strange warmth spreading through her chest. It is beautiful, and may I touch it? Danny looked surprised but nodded. Sure. Lyria reached out with her 3 fingers, and the moment she made contact with his skin, everything changed. A surge of energy flowed up her arm and into her chest, and images flooded her mind showing her spiraling galaxies, and strands of glowing DNA and mathematical equations that seemed to write themselves across her vision. And she saw Danny's face, but also countless other faces stretching back through time, and she felt connections forming between her cells and his in ways that should be impossible. She gasped and pulled her hand back, and her heart's racing wildly. Danny stared at her with wide eyes and his breathing quick. What just happened? Because I felt that too. Lyria looked down at her arm and saw faint lines beginning to appear on her blue skin, and they matched the pattern of Danny's tattoo. I do not know, but something about your marking, and it activated something in me. Are you all right? Lyria was not sure how to answer because she felt strange and warm and confused, but not exactly bad. I think so, but this has never happened before. They sat in stunned silence as the party continued around them, and neither of them knew that this moment would change the entire galaxy forever. Lyria barely slept that night because every time she closed her eyes she saw the strange visions from when she touched Danny's tattoo, and the faint markings on her arm had not faded, and if anything they seemed darker and more defined than before. Kessa knocked on her door early in the morning with concern written across her face. Princess, are you ill? Because your biosigns were erratic. All night. Lyria debated telling her advisor what happened, but decided honesty was best. Something occurred at the party and I need to see a doctor. Within an hour, Lyria sat in the colony's medical facility, while a Valdrine physician named Dr. Venn scanned her with various instruments, and his expression grew increasingly worried with each reading. This is highly unusual, Princess, and your cellular activity has increased dramatically, and your genetic code appears to be in flux. What does that mean? I am not certain yet, but something has triggered a biological response in your body, and I need to run more comprehensive tests. The testing took most of the day, and Lyria submitted to scans and samples with growing anxiety because she could feel the changes happening inside her, and her body temperature kept fluctuating, and she felt restless and energized in ways she never had before. Finally, Dr. Venn called her into his office with Kessa present, and his face was grave. Princess Lyria, and what I am about to tell you is difficult to believe, but the evidence is clear, and your body is undergoing genetic modification at the cellular level. How is that possible? The doctor pulled up holographic displays showing her DNA structure. Something introduced new genetic sequences into your system, and they are integrating with your existing DNA and creating hybrid patterns I have never seen before. And can you think of any unusual contact you had in the last day? Lyria hesitated, then described touching Danny's tattoo and the energy surge she felt. Dr. Venn sat back heavily in his chair. The human did this. I do not think he knew it would happen. Kessa stood abruptly with anger in her voice. The humans have attacked our princess. No, Lyria said firmly, because it was not an attack, and Danny seemed as shocked as I was, and whatever happened was not intentional. But we must report this, Dr. Venn said, and this has serious diplomatic implications. Before Lyria could respond, an urgent message came through from Ambassador Holland, requesting an immediate meeting. When they arrived at the ambassador's office, they found Danny already there, looking worried and uncomfortable. Princess Lyria, and Danny came to me this morning and said something strange happened between you two, and I need to understand what occurred. Lyria explained the situation while Danny sat quietly, and when she finished, Ambassador Holland looked at Dr. Venice. The princess in danger. Not immediate danger, but I cannot predict the long-term effects, and this is unprecedented in Valdrine medical history. Danny finally spoke, and his voice, rough with emotion. I would never intentionally hurt anyone, and especially not the princess, and my grandmother's tattoo was supposed to be protective, and I do not understand what went wrong. Lyria felt an unexpected surge of sympathy for him. You did nothing wrong, Danny, and I touched you of my own choice. Ambassador Holland considered for a long moment, then made a decision. I am going to contact Earth medical experts, and we need to understand what this tattoo actually is, and in the meantime, I think it best if you two avoid further contact. Over the next week, Lyria underwent daily medical examinations, while human scientists studied recordings of Danny's tattoo, and what they discovered shocked everyone involved. A human geneticist named Dr. Liu presented findings to a joint meeting of human and Valdrine officials. This tattoo pattern is not simply decorative, and it contains encoded information at the quantum level, and we believe it acts as a genetic key that can unlock dormant sequences in compatible species. Compatible species, Kessa repeated. And what does that mean? Dr. Liu looked uncomfortable. We are still analyzing the data, but preliminary results suggest the tattoo pattern matches ancient genetic markers found in ruins across the galaxy and sites attributed to a long-extinct civilization. We call the architects. The architects are a myth. Ambassador Holland said. Perhaps not. Dr. Liu replied. And human DNA contains unusual sequences that do not match our evolutionary history and sequences that appear deliberately engineered, and we have always assumed they were genetic junk. But this tattoo suggests otherwise. Lyria spoke up from where she sat. What are you saying about humans? Dr. Liu took a deep breath. We believe humans may be descendants of the architects, or perhaps their final creation, and our reproductive method and genetic flexibility, and these encoded tattoo patterns all point to deliberate design. The room fell silent as everyone processed this information. Dr. Venn pulled up Lyria's latest scans. If this is true, then what happened between Princess Lyria and Danny Martinez may be the first successful activation of architect protocols in billions of years. What protocols? Lyria asked. Cross-species genetic integration, Dr. Venn said quietly. And your body is adapting to enable reproduction with Danny. Specifically, Lyria felt her heart skip because reproduction was sacred to the Valdrine, and the idea that she could create offspring with an alien was both thrilling and terrifying. Is that even possible? Dr. Liu nodded slowly. Your genetic changes suggest yes, an offspring from such a union would combine traits from both species and potentially creating something entirely new. Kessa stood with outrage clear in her voice. This is an abomination, and the princess cannot be allowed to proceed with this. Lyria turned to her advisor with unexpected calm. That is not your decision to make. But Princess, I felt something when I touched Danny, and something profound and ancient, and I do not think it was random. And if the architects designed this to happen, then perhaps we should not fight it. Ambassador Holland raised her hands for calm. Let us not make hasty decisions, and Princess Lyria needs time to consider what this means, and Danny has been kept in isolation to prevent further incidents, and we should continue research before taking any action. But rumors had already begun spreading through the colony, and by the next day news reached other Valdrine ships in the sector, and within 3 days a priority message arrived from the Valdrine homeworld. King Theron himself demanded his daughter return home immediately for examination and protection. Lyria knew she had no choice but to obey her father, but as she prepared to leave Kepler-7, she requested one final meeting. Danny was brought to a secure conference room, and he looked tired and worried. "They are sending me home," Lyria said. "I heard, and I am sorry this happened, or are you sorry?" Danny met her eyes and shook his head. "No, and even with all this craziness, and I am not sorry." "And is that wrong?" Lyria smiled. "Despite everything, I do not think so." They sat in silence for a moment. Then Danny spoke quietly. "Will I see you again?" "Do not know, but I hope so." When Lyria boarded the ship that would take her home, she looked back at Kepler-7 and felt the strange markings on her arm pulse with warmth. And she knew that whatever happened next would change both their worlds forever. The journey home took 2 weeks, and by the time they arrived, the entire Valdrine Empire knew about the incident, and opinions were sharply divided. Some called for war with Earth, claiming humans had deliberately attacked their princess, while others saw opportunity in the potential for cross-species reproduction. King Theron waited in the palace when Lyria arrived, and he embraced his daughter with obvious relief. "I was so worried. I am well, father." He pulled back and examined the markings on her arm. "But changed, yes, but perhaps change is not always bad. We shall see, my daughter, because the Council demands answers, and the galaxy is watching what happens next." The Valdrine Council chamber was ancient and carved from crystal that captured and refracted light in patterns meant to inspire truth and wisdom. But as Lyria stood before the 12 council members, she felt only tension and fear radiating from the assembled leaders. Her father, King Theron, sat on his throne looking older than she remembered, and the stress of recent weeks had clearly taken its toll on him. Ambassador Krell from the Xantine Empire sat among the observers, and his presence made Lyria uneasy because the Xantine had always been suspicious of humans, and this incident gave them ammunition for their anti-human rhetoric. Council member Vera spoke first, and her voice sharp with accusation. "Princess Lyria, you stand before us having undergone unauthorized genetic modification through contact with an alien species, and you must explain how this occurred and what your intentions are." Lyria kept her voice steady and clear. "I attended a diplomatic function at the human colony as part of my official mission, and during casual conversation, a human named Danny Martinez showed me a tattoo that his grandmother had designed, and when I touched it with his permission, a transfer of genetic information occurred that neither of us anticipated or intended. Did this human know what would happen?" Council member Torrin asked. "No, and he was as surprised as I was, and human doctors have since determined that the tattoo contained encoded genetic data that even Danny did not know existed." Ambassador Krell stood without waiting for recognition. "Convenient that humans claim ignorance after genetically assaulting a Valdrine princess, and this attack demands a military response." "It was not an attack," Lyria said firmly, "and it was an accident caused by ancient technology that neither species fully understands." King Theron gestured for calm. "We have reviewed all the evidence and testimony from both human and Valdrine medical experts, and there is no indication of malicious intent. That does not change the fact that Princess Lyria has been contaminated," Farah said, "and her DNA is no longer purely Valdrine. Lyria felt anger rise in her chest. "I am still Valdrine, and still your princess, and my genetic code may be changing, but my loyalty and identity remain unchanged." Council member Fenn, who had remained silent until now, spoke in a thoughtful tone. "Perhaps we are looking at this incorrectly, and if the human scientists are correct about architect involvement, then this may not be contamination, but activation." "Activation of what Vera demanded, of our true potential," Fenn replied, "and the architects were the most advanced civilization in galactic history. And if they designed humans as genetic keys to unlock evolution in other species, then fighting this process may be fighting our own advancement. That is speculation, not fact. Vara shot back. But worth considering, King Theron said. And we have spent centuries wondering why the architects vanished. And what if they did not vanish but transformed? And what if humans are their legacy and their gift to the Galaxy Ambassador? Krell's four eyes narrowed dangerously. The Xantine Empire will never accept human corruption of pure bloodlines. And if the Valdrine embrace this abomination, we will be forced to take action. Are you threatening us, King? Theron asked, and his voice cold. I am stating facts, and many species share our concerns about human expansion and genetic infiltration. Lyria stepped forward with her decision made. Then let me offer a solution and allow me to return to Kepler-7 and complete the process that has begun. The council chamber erupted in shouts of protest and support silence. King Theron commanded, and when order was restored, he looked at his daughter with sadness and pride mixed in his expression. You understand what you are proposing? Yes, father, and my body has already begun adapting for reproduction with Danny, and fighting the process causes me pain and discomfort, and completing it may provide answers about the architects and their intentions, and if it endangers your life, Vara asked, then I will have served my people by advancing our knowledge. And is that not what royalty is supposed to do? Council member Fenn nodded approvingly. The princess shows great courage, and I support allowing her to proceed under medical supervision. I also support this, King Theron said, and my daughter has always put duty before personal comfort, and if she believes this is the right path, then I trust her judgment. The council voted, and the decision was close, but ultimately 7 members supported Lyria's return to Kepler-7, while 5 opposed Ambassador Krell stood with barely controlled rage. The Xantine Empire formally protests this decision, and we will be watching closely, and any offspring produced from this unnatural union will never be recognized as legitimate. Lyria met his glare calmly. Then it is fortunate we do not require your approval. After the council session ended, King Theron walked with Lyria through the palace gardens where they had spent many peaceful hours during her childhood. You are certain about this? No, Lyria admitted, but I am certain that fighting what is happening to me feels wrong. And when I touched Danny, something awakened in me. Father, and something that feels like it was always meant to be there. He took her hand gently. Your mother would be proud of your bravery. I wish she were here to advise me. She would tell you to follow your heart. And just as I am telling you now. They walked in comfortable silence for a while. Then Lyria asked the question that had been troubling her. Do you think the architects planned this? I think the architects were far more advanced than we can imagine, and if they encoded instructions into human genetics, then they must have had good reasons. But why make it dependent on touch and on tattoos and on such random chance? Perhaps it was not random, King Theron said, and perhaps Danny's grandmother was guided by instincts she did not understand to create that specific pattern, and perhaps you were guided to Kepler-7 and to that party, and to touch that tattoo at exactly the right moment. You think the architects are still influencing events. I think we are all part of something larger than we understand. And the architects may have set events in motion billions of years ago that are only now coming to fruition. The thought was both comforting and terrifying. 2 days later, Lyria boarded a ship back to Kepler-7, and this time, she traveled with a full medical team and diplomatic escort and security forces. The journey gave her time to think about what she was really choosing, because completing the bonding process with Danny meant more than just genetic integration, and it meant accepting him as a partner and potentially creating offspring that would be the first of a new hybrid species. She wondered if Danny had been told she was returning, and if he felt the same pull toward her that she felt toward him, and the markings on her arm had grown more pronounced during her time away, and they pulsed gently with warmth whenever she thought of him. Dr. Venn conducted daily examinations during the journey. Your body is actively seeking completion of the bonding process, Princess, and the genetic changes have accelerated, and I estimate you have perhaps 2 weeks before the process reaches a critical point. What happens at the critical point? Either you complete the bond with Danny, or your body will reject. The changes and the rejection would likely be fatal. Lyria absorbed this information calmly. Then we have no time to waste. When the ship entered orbit around Kepler 7, Lyria felt her twin hearts racing with anticipation and nervousness. Ambassador Holland met her at the landing platform with Danny standing slightly behind her, Princess Lyria. And welcome back, and we have prepared facilities for your stay, and Danny has been fully briefed on the situation. Lyria barely heard the ambassador because all her attention focused on Danny, and he looked at her with such intensity that she felt heat spread through her body. The markings on her arm blazed with sudden warmth, and she saw a matching light begin to glow beneath Danny's sleeve where his tattoo was. They are reacting to each other, Dr. Venn said with wonder in his voice. Lyria walked toward Danny and stopped a few feet away. Hello, Danny. Hello, Princess. Just Lyria, please. He smiled, and it was the same warm smile she remembered. Hello, Lyria, and I have been thinking about you every day. I have been thinking about you too. Are you ready for this? I do not know if anyone can truly be ready, but I am willing. That is enough for me. As they stood looking at each other, Lyria knew that everything was about to change, and not just for them, but for the entire galaxy. The medical facility on Kepler 7 had been transformed into a research center, with equipment from both human and Valdrine scientists working alongside each other and studying every aspect of what they now called the Architect Protocol. Lyria sat in a comfortable chair while sensors monitored her vital signs, and across from her, Danny sat in a matching chair with his own array of medical equipment, and they had been like this for 3 days, while doctors ran endless tests and took countless samples. Dr. Venn and Dr. Liu stood together, reviewing holographic displays that showed the genetic changes occurring in both Lyria and Danny. Fascinating. Dr. Liu murmured, and Danny's DNA is also changing and adapting to match Lyria's modifications, and the tattoo is not just affecting her but creating a two-way genetic exchange. This suggests a true bonding process. Dr. Venn agreed, and both individuals are being prepared for biological compatibility. Lyria watched the doctor's work and tried to be patient, but she could feel the pull toward Danny growing stronger every day, and it was becoming physically uncomfortable to be near him without touching, and her body seemed to know exactly what it wanted, even if her mind was still uncertain. Danny caught her looking at him and gave her a small smile. This is weird, right? Very weird. Lyria agreed, but also kind of amazing. He laughed, and the sound made her hearts flutter. Leave it to humans to think genetic modification is amazing. Your people do seem to embrace change more easily than mine. That is because we have had to adapt or die so many times in our history, and flexibility is in our nature. Perhaps that is what the architects intended, Lyria said thoughtfully, and humans, as the adaptable species that could bring evolution to others. Dr. Liu looked up from her work. That is an interesting theory. Princess and human genetic structure is unusually modular, and almost like we were designed to interface with other species. Danny frowned. So my ancestors were created as some kind of universal adapter. Perhaps Dr. Venn said, or perhaps they were designed as teachers and guides, and the final gift of a dying civilization, trying to ensure life would continue to evolve long after they were gone. That is a big responsibility, Danny said quietly. One you did not ask for, Lyria added. No, but neither did you, and yet here we are. Their eyes met and held, and Lyria felt the connection between them pulse with energy. Dr. Venn cleared his throat. I think it is time we discuss the next phase, and your genetic compatibility is now at 93%, and your bodies are ready for physical bonding. What exactly does that mean? Danny asked. It means you need to complete the reproductive connection. Dr. Liu explained, and not necessarily to produce offspring immediately, but to finalize the genetic integration that has begun. Lyria felt her face flush, and even though Valdrine reproduction was very different from human reproduction, the implications were clear. And if we choose not to, Dr. Venn asked, then Princess Lyria's body will continue to deteriorate as it fights against incomplete genetic changes, and she has perhaps 10 days before the damage becomes irreversible. Danny stood abruptly. Why did you not tell us this sooner? We were trying to find an alternative solution, Dr. Liu said. But there is none, and the architect protocol requires completion. or it self-destructs. Lyria stood as well, and her decision made. Then we complete it. Danny turned to her. You should not have to do this just to survive. I am not doing it just to survive. And I feel drawn to you, Danny, and in ways that go beyond biology, and perhaps that is also part of the architect design, but it does not feel forced and it feels right. Do you really mean that, yes, and do you feel the same? Danny took a step closer. I have felt connected to you since the moment we met, and I thought I was going crazy. But maybe I was just feeling what the architects intended. They stood, facing each other, and the air between them seemed to shimmer with energy. The doctors discreetly left the room to give them privacy. This is a lot of pressure, Danny said with a nervous laugh. Agreed. But perhaps we should stop thinking of it as duty and start thinking of it as choice. You choose this. I choose you. Danny reached out slowly and took her hand, and the moment their skin touched, both of them gasped as energy flowed between them. And it was stronger than before, and more focused. And Lyria could feel her genetic code shifting and aligning with his. Your tattoo, Lyria whispered, because it was glowing bright enough to see through his sleeve. So are your markings. They looked down at Lyria's arm, where the patterns now blazed with blue-white, light that matched the glow from Danny's tattoo. I think the architects are giving us their blessing, Danny said, or their impatience. Over the next few hours, they talked about everything and their fears and hopes and what it would mean to bond across species and create something new. Danny told her about growing up on Earth before joining the colony program, and about his grandmother who had been obsessed with patterns and mathematics and ancient mysteries. She used to say the universe was trying to tell us something, and that if we just learned to read the signs, we would understand our purpose. And I thought she was being poetic, but maybe she actually knew something. Maybe she was touched by the architects too. Lyria suggested. Lyria shared stories about growing up as Valdrine royalty, and the pressure to be perfect and represent her people well, and how lonely it could be at the top. I have never felt like I could truly be myself with anyone, until I met you. Danny squeezed her hand gently. I am honored that you feel that way. As night fell on Kepler 7, they were still talking, and the medical staff gave them space while monitoring from a distance. Finally, Dr. Venn knocked softly on the door. Princess and Danny, and we should proceed soon because the genetic window is optimal right now. Lyria and Danny looked at each other and nodded. The medical team had prepared a private room with comfortable furnishings and monitoring equipment that was as unobtrusive as possible. Before we begin, Dr. Liu said, I want you both to know that this is unprecedented and we will be monitoring closely, but we will not intervene unless there is a medical emergency, and this is your experience and your choice. Thank you, Lyria said. When they were alone, Danny turned to Lyria with vulnerability in his eyes. I have never done anything like this before, and Valdrine and human bonding are very different. Neither have I, and not with anyone. And Valdrine usually bond through energy transfer without physical contact. But my body knows what to do even if my mind is uncertain. Mine too. Danny admitted. They moved closer together, and Lyria could feel the heat radiating from his body and smell his scent, which was different from any Valdrine but not unpleasant. When they finally kissed, it was tentative at first, but then the architect protocol activated fully, and energy exploded between them in waves of light and sensation. Lyria felt their genetic codes merging and dancing together and creating new patterns that had never existed before. And she saw visions of countless worlds and species and the vast plan the architects had set in motion. She saw why humans had been designed with such adaptability and why Valdrine had been given such long lives and stable genetics, and how together they could create offspring that combined the best of both species. The bonding lasted hours, and when it was finally complete, they lay together, exhausted, but transformed. Danny looked at his arm where the tattoo now glowed with a soft, permanent light. I think we just changed the galaxy. Lyria traced the matching patterns on her own arm that now glowed with the same light. I think the architects have been waiting billions of years for this moment outside. The room, Dr. Venn and Dr. Liu stared at the medical readings with awe. The genetic integration is complete, Dr. Liu whispered, and stable and perfect. More than perfect, Dr. Venn said, and they have created a template that could work for dozens of species combinations, and this is not just about them, and this is about the future of galactic evolution. News of the successful bonding spread quickly through the colony, and within days it reached Earth and the Valdrine homeworld and every other major civilization. Reactions ranged from celebration to horror, and some saw it as the beginning of a new era while others viewed it as the end of species purity. But in a quiet room on Kepler 7, none of that mattered, because Lyria and Danny had found something rare and precious, and they had found each other. 3 months after the bonding, Lyria stood on the observation deck of Kepler 7 and watched ships arrive from across the galaxy, and some came in peace, seeking to understand what had happened, while others came with weapons ready, believing they were witnessing an abomination that threatened the natural order. Danny joined her and wrapped his arm around her waist in the human gesture of affection she had come to love. Big day. The biggest Lyria agreed because today representatives from 15 species would gather to discuss the implications of their bonding and what it meant for the future. She placed her hand on her abdomen where new life was growing, and the child inside her carried genetic material from both human and Valdrine and would be the first of a new generation. "Are you nervous about the baby?" Danny asked, terrified and excited and hopeful all at once. "Me too. And I keep thinking about what kind of world we are bringing them into. A changing one." Lyria said, "But change is not always bad." They walked together to the main conference hall where Ambassador Holland had arranged the historic meeting, and security was intense, because tensions between pro-human and anti-human factions had escalated into violence in some sectors. The Xantine Empire had mobilized military forces near Valdrine space, and Ambassador Krell made no secret of his desire to prevent what he called human contamination from spreading. Inside the conference hall, representatives from 15 species sat in carefully arranged seating that prevented traditional enemies from being too close together. King Theron had traveled from the Valdrine homeworld, and he nodded encouragingly at his daughter as she entered. The human delegation included representatives from Earth and all major colonies, and they looked nervous but determined. Ambassador Holland called the meeting to order. "We are here today because something unprecedented has occurred, and Princess Lyria of the Valdrine Empire and Danny Martinez of Earth have successfully completed a cross-species genetic bonding, and preliminary medical reports indicate Princess Lyria is now carrying a hybrid child, and we must decide as a galactic community how to respond." Ambassador Krell stood immediately. "The Xantine Empire's position is clear, and this bonding represents a violation of natural law, and the child should not be allowed to be born." Outrage erupted from several delegations. "By what authority do you threaten an unborn child?" King Theron demanded. "By the authority of preserving species integrity." Krell shot back, "And if humans can genetically infiltrate the Valdrine, then no species is safe." Lyria stood and the room fell silent, because despite the controversy, she commanded, "Respect and understand the fear driving your words, Ambassador Krell, but you are operating from incomplete information. And what happened between Danny and me was not infiltration, but activation of ancient protocols designed by the architects. The architects are extinct," said a representative from the Hexari collective. "Are they?" Lyria asked, "or did they simply transform themselves? And Dr. Liu, please present your findings." Dr. Liu activated a holographic display showing genetic analysis. "We have identified architect genetic markers in human DNA and also in Valdrine DNA, and in fact in the DNA of 9 species represented in this room. And the markers were dormant until activated by the specific combination found in Danny's tattoo." "This is impossible," the Hexari representative said. "Yet it is true," Dr. Venn added. "And we have verified these findings through multiple independent tests, and the architects did not vanish, and they distributed themselves throughout the galaxy as genetic seeds waiting for the right conditions to activate." "But why?" a reptilian delegate from the Korthax asked. "To prevent stagnation." Dr. Liu explained, and the architects understood that isolated species eventually reach evolutionary dead ends, and by encoding protocols for cross-species bonding, they ensured continued evolution and adaptation. "You are saying we were all designed to eventually mix," Ambassador Holland said. "Not mix exactly, Dr. Venn clarified, but to exchange beneficial traits and create new combinations, while preserving what makes each species unique. And Lyria and Danny's child will be both Valdrine and human, but also something entirely new. Ambassador, Krell shook his head. This is madness, and you are asking us to abandon everything that defines our species, No King Theron said. And we are asking you to expand your definition, and my daughter is still Valdrine in every way that matters, and she has simply gained additional capabilities. The debate continued for hours, with some species expressing cautious interest while others remained firmly opposed. Then a delegate from the Primary Enlightened stood, and the entire room fell silent, because the Primary were the oldest known civilization, and rarely involved themselves in galactic politics, have studied the architects for millennia, the Primary delegate said, and her voice ancient and wise, and we have waited for this moment, because our own genetic analysis predicted it would eventually occur. You knew about the protocols, Ambassador, Holland asked. We suspected, and the architects left clues in ancient sites across the galaxy and patterns and mathematical formulas and genetic sequences, and now Princess Lyria and Danny Martinez have proven what we only theorized. The Primary delegate turned to address the entire assembly. The question before us is not whether this bonding should have occurred because it was inevitable, and the question is whether we will embrace the evolution the architects intended, or whether we will fight against our own genetic destiny. What would you have us do? The Hexari representative asked. Accept that change is necessary for survival, the Primary said, and study the protocols, and allow volunteers from other species to attempt similar bondings, and move forward together or be left behind. Over the next 3 hours, the assembly debated and argued and eventually voted. 11 species voted to support continued research and peaceful integration of architect protocols, while 4 species, including the Xantine Empire, voted against and declared their intention to resist by force if necessary. Ambassador Krell stood with barely contained fury. The Xantine Empire will not stand by while humans corrupt the galaxy, and we will protect species purity, by any means necessary. And this is your only warning. The meeting ended with deep divisions, but also with hope, because 11 species represented a significant majority of galactic civilization. That evening, Lyria and Danny sat together in their quarters watching the stars. We may have just started a war, Danny said quietly, or prevented one. Lyria replied, because if we had hidden what happened or tried to suppress the architect protocols, someone else would have discovered them eventually, and without proper understanding or preparation. Do you think other species will attempt bonding? Some will, and those who are brave enough to embrace change and fear drives people to do terrible things, but so does hope. Danny pulled her closer. Whatever happens, we face it together. Always, Lyria agreed. 2 weeks later, the Xantine Empire attacked a human colony transport, claiming it was carrying genetic weapons, and the first shots of what would become known as the Evolution War had been fired Earth, and the Valdrine Empire immediately formed a defensive alliance, and were quickly joined by 9 other species who supported the architect protocols. The war was brutal, but brief, because the combined forces of the alliance overwhelmed the Xantine and their few allies within 6 months. During the conflict, Lyria gave birth to a daughter they named Hope, and she had her mother's blue skin and silver hair, but her father's brown eyes and 5-fingered hands instead of 3, and she was healthy and beautiful and represented the future. News of Hope's birth spread across the galaxy, and even some who had opposed the bonding found it difficult to maintain their hatred when faced with images of a smiling baby, who was simply innocent of the politics surrounding her existence as the war ended and treaties were signed. Lyria stood before another galactic assembly holding her daughter. Some of you still believe what happened between Danny and me was wrong, Lyria said, but I ask you to look at Hope and tell me she should not exist. No one spoke. The architects gave us a gift and the ability to evolve together and to create new combinations that are stronger and more adaptable than any single species could be alone. And we can reject this gift out of fear or embrace it with courage. Over the next year, 17 cross-species bondings were successfully completed between humans and various alien races, and each produced healthy offspring with unique combinations of traits. Humans began to fulfill their role as genetic keys unlocking evolution across the galaxy, and what had started with a simple touch of a tattoo became a revolution that would reshape civilization. Danny's grandmother's tattoo pattern was studied and replicated, and scientists discovered it was just one of thousands of such patterns encoded into human genetics, and each designed to activate protocols with different species. The architects had not left humanity one key, but an entire library of keys, and each unlocking different potential 5 years after that first meeting. Lyria and Danny stood with Hope, who was now a bright and curious child who asked endless questions about the universe. She spoke both Valdrine and human languages fluently, and demonstrated abilities from both species, and she was faster and stronger than most Valdrine, but more patient and thoughtful than most humans. Other hybrid children played nearby, and each unique, and each representing a different combination of species working together.